Okay, so I'm waiting for that antler to dry a little bit so I can show you how it turned out. Uh, just a quick word on why did I do another video on antler restoration? I've already done one. Well, to be honest, it's a work in progress, and I've tried a lot of different things. And to me, this right here is actually a little bit simpler than some of the other stuff that I've used. I like the results better, and you just have to get some experience in learning what it's going to take to get the specific antler you're doing to the results that you want, because there's a big difference from antler to antler. You can put on the exact same stuff one antler to the next and get radically different results depending on its age, degree of chalkiness, and whether or not you've done repairs on it and that. I didn't do any repairs in this video. I'll probably do another one at some point, how to replace a tine that's broken off or something like that, because it's actually not any more complicated, but it's a whole nother process, and it actually can be done right while you're doing the rest of these steps. But those things are, easy to get things to use. They're not that expensive, and I think they get you pretty good results. My goal was to get to the point where if I'm experimenting on some of these decent antlers, because if I ever find that giant once in a lifetime buck, I don't want to be experimenting at that point. I want to be able to know that I can take it and turn it into the trophy that it deserves to be. And so that's what I'm sharing with you. Some of you guys can take this information and keep playing with it, keep experimenting, and maybe share some tips and tricks with me. All I know is the guys that are good at it, the guys that you see have phenomenal results, they don't tell what they're using. This has taken me a lot of digging and experimenting to kind of learn what I think that they're doing, at least some of the things that they're using and some of the techniques they're using. And I think it works good, and I think you'll see from this antler, I didn't quite get the color I was looking for, but I don't dislike the antler, and you can judge for yourself. It looks better than anything that I've seen. Another video on YouTube of people restoring antlers, and keep in mind this was a chalk, deeply cracked, older antler, and this is the results that I got from the process. Okay, I've had a lot of requests for another video on restoring antlers and what methods I use. It's definitely been a work in progress. So this is a set that I'm working on right now, and I didn't get the steps that I took to get it to this point right here. So I'm going to back up and get another antler that was similar. So here's an antler, big 4-point, couple of cheaters there, with significant cracking. You'll notice that that's got significant cracking. Now, those antlers in there, not only did they have the cracking, but they were starting to get almost that scaly, chalky effect on them. You're never going to get the results you want if you don't get that antler smooth. So if you have that, I had to do a little bit of sanding, light sanding with some 220 grit to get it back down to smooth before I could start. So what I use, and I've had good luck with it, I just use wallboard joint compound. It's cheap, it's easy to work with, washes off with water, and it seems to work as good as anything else that I've tried. So that's what I'm going to use. So let me get this set up. Okay, so I'm going to take this wallboard compound. I usually wear gloves, but just for this one right here, I'm not going to. So the purpose here is just to fill the cracks. All I want to do is fill the cracks. I don't want to take out any of the texture, the ribs, the dips, the valleys of the antler. So this right here is probably one of the most critical steps, that you take your time, you do not add too much of this. All I'm doing is just going through and lightly pressing it into any of the cracks. And typically you're only going to have cracking on one side primarily, but this one's got some, my guess is this one's probably was drug around or flipped by coyotes or something because it weathered on both sides. So this one's going to take a little bit more work than those other ones because they were probably more chalky, but it's all on one side. They actually have one good side, and that makes it easier if you only have to work on one side. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do this whole antler like this, where I'm trying to just push that, I'm just trying to push that wallboard compound down into the cracks. Fill all those cracks up so that I can start with a smooth surface. And you can see how that works. I'm just basically trying to press it in there because I'm going to go back here and wash most of this back off. So I want to press it as far as I can into those cracks so I don't pull it out of the cracks and re-expose them. So let me finish this step up. You can see how that works. I'm just filling cracks. Okay, so now I'm going to take this and try to get all of the drywall compound off that I can, that is not in the cracks. I just want it left in just the cracks. Now, just a word, I found that there are many products that people use, and most of them will work, and most of them will take a set of antlers to make it better than it was. Of course, you know, it was all chalky, but just for example, potassium permanganate that I've used with varying results. I've never really liked the color of it. I don't think the color of it is a natural antler color. It is brown and it's not distractingly bad, but for at least this area, I don't think it ever gives you a natural color. See, so what I'm trying to do here is I'm taking off all of that compound without taking it out of the cracks if possible. That's all I want left. I want all of these dips and ridges and valleys and all the stuff that gives this thing texture and makes it look like an antler. I don't want to lose any of that stuff, and it will come into play later on. What I was saying, that there's lots of things that will work depending on the condition of the antler. I've got some stain, and I'll kind of probably show a few of the different things that I've got. I've got some stain up there that I got from a taxidermy place, that if you have like a hard white antler, it's probably the simplest way to get a really nice looking antler. If it is a true hard white, no cracks, it's got that, you know, it's still got the sheen almost, I mean, meaning it's not got any chalk to it, no cracks. Just putting color back onto an antler like that is not very hard, and you can get really nice results on those hard white antlers. I use this brush to try and get, especially here on the base where it's so knobby, it just wants to shred my sponge. So as much as possible, I'll try to take it back out with the brush. Anyway, a hard white antler is not hard at all to get good results with, and just about anything will work. And just, you know, anything from coffee grounds to even some light stains, wood stains meaning, will work and give you a decent result. But the chalkier the antler gets, the worse your results are, and the more difficult it is to return it to as close as possible to what it looked like before. You know, the day it fell off that deer's antler, or the day before it fell off that deer's head. I mean, that's what you really want, is you want to turn it back to what it was, and so to get it back to the color that is natural for your area, take some experimentation. In my area, there are certain areas where I shed hunt where the antlers can be very dark, say for a burn. And everybody loves those chocolate Saskatchewan looking antlers. And there are places like down in the desert that doesn't really have a lot of vegetation, but that them bucks clean off on. And the antlers never do get very dark. They're always very light. That seems to be the hardest one to reproduce and the one I'm still working on. All of these antlers that I'm working on here, the set that's in there, and so now you can see that I have taken off all of that mud that isn't in cracks. All I'm left with is just the fill in the cracks, and you can see that antler is already starting to look better. You can't see that the cracks near as bad. So I'm just going to let it dry here a little bit, and then I'll clean out my sponge really good and get the sponge wrung out as completely as I can. And then I'll go over the antler one more time just to get my fingerprints and my grip and where I'm holding it and that stuff, just wipe it back off, and to get all of it. So typically if you have a good side and a bad side of the antler, this one was pretty much bad on both sides, but the other ones that I'm doing upstairs, they actually had a really good side to them. They were just super chalky on the exposed side. They just never were ever flipped. I think antlers get moved around and drug around and played with more than we'd think. Everything from other deer to coyotes, porcupines, squirrels, you know, that mess with the antlers. So there it is. You can see that we've now filled all those cracks, and really the only place that we have the wallboard compound now is in those little cracks. So now I'm going to put it in there to dry. So the things that you've probably seen people use: coffee grounds, stains, potassium permanganate. Almost nobody on YouTube seems to be able to pronounce that, but it's potassium permanganate. I just, like I said, I don't like the color that brings into an antler. Like here's a good example. One of the elk that I colored with it, I just don't think that it is a natural color for elk. This is an example of some of the desert coloring. This is a brown set that I found, and it just never is very, actually that set of sheds and this buck right here came within 200-300 yards of each other. They just never get very dark. But so I don't like the potassium permanganate anymore. It does work, and it's better than nothing. I've tried this antler stain number 2 taxidermy brown. And like I said, this stuff right here, if you can put it on a hard white antler, it actually puts a decent color on them. If you actually do anything to the antler to try and fix the cracking or anything, that I've tried various different types of paint, but you can see what you end up with is a very glossy. It just does not want to stick to it anymore, and it beads up, and you have to keep brushing and brushing, and it turns out super glossy and kind of splotchy, and I've never got a good result with it on an antler that had to be repaired at all. So I got a new one actually in today called Antler Stain. It's a different formula that I'm going to try at some point. But what we're going to do today is actually going to be some oil paint. So I've got various colors of oil paint here. Raw umber and white being the two that I'll use primarily. Maybe a little bit of golden camel, but those are the ones that I've that I've had the best results with, and you can kind of mix and match and play with the colors and come up with a color that will be closer to the antlers that you have in your area. So for example, here is more of a Manzanita mountain buck, much darker, especially on the bases. This is a natural color. These browns were found probably within a couple days of that buck dropping. You know, here's antler. This is another desert buck. Again, it's a brown, and you can see how light he is. I mean, that barely any color at all on those antlers, and I'd sure like to find that buck sometime. But this right here would be what I would be going for, because this is what most of our bucks are going to be. Something in this color range right here, where you've got the low lights underneath and then some darker streaks throughout and then darker bases. And that's what I'm going to be trying to get. And you'll notice that everybody tries real hard to get the ivory on the tips. They don't always have ivory on their tips. You notice this one, no ivory, ivory here, but no real ivory on any of these. I've seen bucks that are ivory, you know, clear down, you know, 4 or 5 inches of ivory on them. Like almost like an elk tip. But I've also seen a lot of bucks that actually don't have any of that whitening at the tip, so I actually try less to get that. I'll try to go for a little bit of it, but it's not necessary to get it clear down, because not all bucks have that. But this is what we're going for. That's what I'm going to try and get those antlers to look like. We'll see how it comes out. Alright, now we're getting ready to try some color here. Let me see where I'm at in the screen. I'm gonna try some golden camel and white mixed here. About 2/3 golden camel and 1/3 white is what I got there. I'm going to use lacquer thinner. To thin it with. Move all this out so I can try to stay in the screen. Now I'm going to start on the base here, because for one, the base is going to end up darker anyway. So if I'm darker than I need to be, then less of a problem later. The good thing about this color is if you don't like it, you can wipe most of it back off. And if you really don't like it, you can, with some warm water, you can get most of it off and start over with a different color. So let's see where we are here on color. Okay. Kind of an interesting color. But for a base coat, we'll see how that goes. Just by brushing it more with the lacquer thinner, I'm going to thin it out. All right, looks like I need to get a little bit more paint out. Always obviously trying to keep the runs and that stuff to a minimum, but you can always come back and brush it. This stuff's fairly forgiving as it goes on. Again, what I'm going for here on this one is trying to find that desert color. And this is just the base layer, the lighter layer. I'm going to come back and wipe some of this back off. If I'm not getting as much off as I want to, I'll come back and brush it back with the lacquer. To help pull off the amount I want off. Now you can see this side that has the little bit of color left on it, how much better it goes almost back to that gloss, that light little sheen that you have on a natural antler. You can see how much easier it is to get a good color on that, and how well this, I can manage the amount of color because it doesn't absorb in quite as much. And I can pull off just about the amount that I want fairly easy. All right, so I've got my raw umber and white, my lacquer thinner. I'm going to start blending these two colors. All right, so I've got my raw umber and white, and more color there than I want, so I'm just going to basically start spreading it out. Enough color there to pretty much finish the rest of the antler if I just keep thinning it out to get a little bit lighter. Going back through, trying to get any of the drips. Going back a little darker on the bases. Pull some off where it's darker than I want it. Right now I'm just trying to get an even color without any runs or drips that are obvious. I'm not gonna lie, this is not really the color that I'm after, which is why this is a practice antler and why, like I said, this is a work in progress. I think the results, as far as, you know, if you leave out the fact that I haven't quite got the colors mixed that I like, you take that antler that was chalk and had really deep cracks all over the whole thing, and you can't see any of the cracking anymore. We've fixed that. The difficult part of this process is finding the right colors that you're looking for, and then even then, you know, you mix it, the base that you're going onto, the antler that you're going onto changes how it ends up on there. I used the same exact color on those other ones and got a nice dark caramel color, and this one's going on a different color. So I'm going to start bringing some of it back off, and if I hate it when I get to that point, I'll take it downstairs with some warm water and take most of this back off and start again. See, I'm bringing it back off, and you can see what we're starting to get some of the highlights and lowlights. Back into it like an antler would normally have. You see that right there. And I'll go back and add just a little bit more of that in with some steel wool or fine grit sandpaper. You have to be really careful, because if you're not really careful with that, it will look like you've taken sandpaper to it, and that's not what you want. Starting to get something here that I am liking better. Not quite yet there, but you guys see the process. You'll have to experiment with the colors. I like raw umber, dark umber, and then you just got to play with other colors to get the color you're looking for. That's something you'll have to kind of figure out, because like I said, you can use the exact same colors on two different antlers and achieve a different color each time. Seeing what happens if I go back over with a little bit of the more of the white. Don't worry about the runs and that stuff that you get right off the bat. You just keep after them until you get rid of them. All right, now we want to take some of that back off. So if you notice right here, you can see this right here, this color. I really like this, the way it's starting to come in. You don't want to panic if you're not exactly where you want to be, because you can always take color off just by how vigorously you come back after it to get it off, and a little bit of that lacquer thinner, if it's not coming off to the amount you want, that'll take off quite a bit by just going back over with the lacquer thinner. I don't know if that you ever get, at least I haven't seen one yet, where you end up with an antler that you just simply can't tell. And that includes ones that I've seen, the guys that do it professionally. I mean, I don't know if you ever get it to the point where a guy that sees a lot of antlers can't tell that it's had work done to it or it's been colored. I don't know if you ever get them to that point. Maybe some guys do, but I've never seen one that I... But I think you can get them to the point where it's, you know, it's not obvious that it was ever a chalk antler. It's not distracting. You can display that antler in a way that, you know, you'd be proud to have it up on your wall. I'm going to come back in here and get those tips lightened up. Got too much white left here on the beam. Lacquer thinner, pull it off. What rubbing it with the cloth is doing also is it's giving it a little bit of that, I'm putting a little bit of gloss into it. So the last thing I'm going to do, if I get to where I like this color, is I'll take a flat polyurethane. I don't want anything, even a semi-gloss is way too much gloss for an antler. And it will just scream restoration. Antlers have a little bit of a gloss, but just a little bit, and too much is too much. All right, so I'm going to keep taking color off here. I'm actually getting to a point where I'm starting to like the color a little bit. It is different and not exactly what I'm after for that other set over there, but I have a ballpark. I have an idea what I'm going to do for those, and I'll show you what happens next. Now I'm coming in here real lightly with the steel wool and adding some more of those highlights back in. I will use just super lightly sandpaper, and it's just tickling it to get some of those ridges pulled back up and out. A lot of this doesn't pop through till you put the clear coat on it. Just real light. You can see how it brought that ridge right there out. I'm tickling it to bring that one out, and you can see all these ribs. You know, doing antlers, the guys that are good at it, it's obviously such a skill and a learned process that, from what I've found, none of them are really willing to share their secrets. And so I am the first to admit that this is a work in progress. As I'm learning how to do it, I'm getting better results all the time. My goal is to, you know, wind up with an antler that I can display and not have it be obvious that it was once chalk. That's what, you know, and then eventually maybe get to the point where you can't tell. Even close scrutiny can't tell. But I don't hate how this is, you know, you could probably saw during the process where it was a little bit like, whoa, what are we gonna end up with? Color wise, it looks kind of weird, but I don't hate this at this point. I think it definitely is starting to get in the realm of what I was going for. That desert, the desert is a light color and almost a green, and with a little bit of playing, you know, we're within a whisker of that. Luckily, this is a practice antler. And you'll have to, I mean, don't try this on a set of antlers that you really care about, especially the first little, you know, as you're trying. Start with an antler that is the same condition as the ones that you're worried about. But that if you mess it up, you're not going to be crying because your once in a lifetime shed find is now some horrible mess. Keep playing with it. There's that one. I'm going to let it dry, and then I'm going to put some clear coat on it, and we'll see how we look. Okay, the final step is, and this is what I use, but you want to use a clear satin or flat polyurethane. You do not want a gloss or semi-gloss. You can see, you don't really see the exact color you're going to get till the semi-gloss goes on it, so I have sprayed it from here up, but not here down. The gloss just kind of gives it that little teeny bit of sheen. That little bit of glow. I'm sure like me, there was a couple points going through this where you're like, holy crap, that color is terrible right now. But I don't hate it. I actually kind of like the way this turned out. One of the good things about antlers is they come in a variety of shades and colors, and dark and light, and you can get away with a little bit. So that is the process that I use. I'm going to have to lay it down here to get the last little bit. But let me let that dry just a little bit, because it'll lose a little bit of that gloss, just enough for the gloss to not look too shiny. And then I'll show you how it came out. Then I'm going to do something fairly similar for this set right here. Okay, so there is the finished product. We took a very chalky, deeply cracked antler, and brought it back. I like that pretty good. The polyurethane isn't 100% dry. It won't be quite as glossy as that once it's 100% dry. It's only been on there about 5 minutes. And if it stays that glossy, I might actually just rub it lightly with some steel wool to take that off, because antlers do have a little bit of gloss, but they're not shiny. Anyway, just try it out. Get some of those oil-based paints from a taxidermy supply place, McKinsey, or a couple of the other ones have kits that have various different colors in them, and experiment with some antlers that are similar to the ones you actually want to try, and that way you can get the process down and get pretty good results. I mean, you remember that thing was, I'll try to put side-by-side pictures, but there it is.